Hello, my name is Raul Fernandez, Select Board Member and Chair of the Task Force for Reimagine Brookline, Policing in Brookline. We'll reimagine some other things at some other date. But welcome to our meeting for December 11th, 2020. This is our penultimate meeting of the calendar year 2020, although our work will continue beyond 2020. Wanted to just start by noting last week we talked about the police reform bill that came out of the state legislature. That has been on the governor's desk. We heard just, I think it was yesterday or day before, that the governor will be returning that bill to the state legislature. There are a couple key provisions he'd like to see changed. It seems one is his opposition to civilians being involved in overseeing police training. He wants to keep that in-house at the Executive Office of Public Safety, where the Municipal Police Training Committee oversees police training currently, not to have that be part of the new, the new post committee that was created by the legislature. And then the other critical piece for him anyway was around facial recognition technology. Him saying that it ignores the important role it can play in solving crime. Notably, that technology is already banned in Brookline by town meeting. Because of the racial and gender disparities that are evident in all research around facial recognition technology. So the next step is that will go back to the legislature. It already has. The legislature could decide to keep the bill as it is. They could decide to make some or all of the changes that have been requested by the governor. By the way, because this process is back in the legislature, it's possible that now new amendments could be tacked onto the bill, debated about, and that could either be a good thing or a problem for that legislation. And then ultimately it will go back to the governor where he could sign it, veto it, or allow it to become law without putting his name on it. And so those are, as far as I know, all the options moving forward on this legislation. I do know that all this has to happen very quickly as this legislative session is drawing to a close. So that's I just wanted to provide an update on that. I've got lots to say on all of this, but I don't want to get on a rant, and we do have lots of work to do. But as always, there's opportunity at the top of the meeting for any announcements or remarks that any member of the task force or staff would like to make. I will say we've got that opening remarks, meeting minutes approval, subcommittee updates, another survey update if we have one for the policing survey. And then we do have something in new business today. We're asking Todd Crane, the transportation administrator, to follow up on some of the information he shared with us sort of more informally last week. And that won't take too long, but wanted to make sure to provide him an opportunity to do that. Any other announcements or remarks from members of the task force? Hearing none, let's get into it. Meeting minutes. Should have received the meeting minutes from Friday, December 4th, 2020. Any issues or updates that folks need to make? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to move that we approve the meeting minutes from Friday, December 4th, 2020. We'll go down the list. Just make sure you're unmuted. Malcolm.
Aye.
Chi-Chi.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Eitan.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Almas.
Yes.
Alexander.
Yes.
Bonnie.
Yes.
Kimberly.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, so approved. All right, subcommittee updates. As you mentioned, we're going in reverse order of where we've been going for a while, is certainly unfair to those toward the bottom of the subcommittee update list. And so this provides an opportunity, and we'll keep doing this for a little bit more time on really important topics. The first one we had on there was walk and talk. Before we get into the subcommittee updates, I just want to note this. We've got our December 18th meeting is going to be our final meeting of the calendar year 2020, and then we'll pick back up after a 2-week hiatus on January 8th, I believe it is, that Friday. It is very important at this point. We're going to hear next week from the Departmental Analysis Subcommittee that's going to produce, that has a report that's going to be coming out that's going to ask us to weigh in on some things as a full task force. If you are not yet there at your subcommittee, I think it's really important that you're able to talk to us about what it is that's coming our way for a possible recommendation or approval, and what it is that you still need more time to work on. So give us a sense of, in addition to whatever updates you have, where you are timeline wise. That's going to be really helpful for us to try to figure out our next few meetings, what those are going to look like and what we need to make sure that we carve out some time for. So with that said, Walk and Talk Subcommittee, you're up first.
Ooh, bright and early first. Okay. Okay, Walk and Talk. We have, well, I will save that for, okay, so we have the flyer. It's all printed. Thank you all for your edits. Well, all printed in that we have 300 copies. Thank you, Devin. That was great. We, yesterday, we had our meeting and brainstormed a strategy to be able to get the word out and get these flyers posted. We are going to have Walk and Talk officers. Anne, is this right? Next Wednesday?
Yes.
Yes, Walk and Talk officers. So far we have one and perhaps more. We are drafting questions for that. That is the gist of it. We are preparing for next week, and in collaboration, sort of, because I'm on both committees with the community engagement subcommittee, we are getting the flyers out.
Is that something you mentioned last week that you might need support on that in terms of flyer distribution? Are you okay on that?
I was going to wait to community engagement to beg you all to take some flyers.
No problem. You can do that.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Oh, go ahead.
Never mind. Nope, go ahead. I'll save it for the other one.
No. So I was going to ask if folks have questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So flyers going out, interview with Walk and Talk officers. Is that next week, you said? Well, obviously it's Friday, right? So next week. And where do you feel you are sort of on the timeline of your work? Are you still in the early stages, somewhere in the middle, or anywhere near reaching conclusions or recommendations?
No, we are not near reaching conclusion, but conclusion is going to be a fuzzy word anyway. Right. But we are still in the push phase to get people to want to respond and talk to us, which I imagine many of us are in. So I would say we are in the middle. I'm hoping, as far, yeah, please chime in.
I'd say we're nearing the middle, but we can't really be in the middle or get toward the end without input from the public. I
was trying to be generous, but you're right.
So, I mean, we're doing everything that we possibly can, and the flyer is fantastic, and we're reaching out as much as possible to community people to help us get the word out. But until we actually hear from folks who are the recipients of this program, it's hard to get further because their voices are so important.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
I think that makes total sense. My job, part of my job as I see it, is to maintain some urgency in this work. And I know you have the same urgency. And your job as a subcommittee is to make sure you get it right. So I'll continue to push for urgency for the entire task force and for us to move forward. And you all make sure that you share the realities of what it takes to actually get feedback from people and how time intensive it is and how important and critical it is that you do the work that you've laid out. So Totally makes sense where you are right now. Totally makes sense. I see Almas has a hand up.
Hi, thanks, Raul. I was just reading your report, the preliminary report, and I just I'm thinking about the connection between our subcommittee, the vulnerable people and people in crisis, and I'm assuming, like, so when I was reading the report, it says, what they do, what the officers do, responding to needs, food insecurity, advice on dealing with children, relationship building, and I know, I guess when you do your interviews, I'm wondering, like, are there other things that come up as far as, like, mental health issues or addiction or, so I'm just trying to figure out that connection, and I'm assuming that that's something you'll be, like, talking about, or just wondering.
My internet glitched for a second, so I missed the very beginning of that.
I
sorry.
can respond briefly. I don't, we're here to hear from the people who are the recipients of this program, and if issues around mental health or substance use come up, then they come up, but it's not the main focus of our work per se. The focus of our work is this program useful? Is it helpful to the people who live there? And to hear directly from them about the utility of the program. They can share with us what they feel they need to, but that's not a focus for us.
Okay, thanks.
If that makes sense. And if anybody's seen my eyeglasses, could you let me know?
Shake your head.
Hopefully we don't have too much to share on screen today. So we'll walk you through it if we do. Anne's got some for you. There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Any other? Oh, I have one other question. We'd mentioned before getting the BHA director involved in this conversation too. Is that planned for soon?
Internet, yes. That is planned for soon.
Okay. All right. You'll let us know.
I will let you know. Yeah.
Good. I'm very interested. I try to make as many of the subcommittee meetings as I can. Unfortunately, my schedule doesn't allow me to make all of them. The one where there's a walk and talk officer speaking, I'm very interested in being there for that one. And certainly if when the BHA director is brought on too, that'd be something I'd be interested in. So I'll keep an eye out. Great. Any other questions or thoughts for this group? All right, press on, and you'll let us know in the community engagement piece how we can support this. So we'll talk more about it then. The next one is vulnerable people and people in crisis.
Yeah, I can start, and then Anne and Alex can jump in. So we're starting to get more focused, I would say. We did spend some time reviewing international programs and looking at some of the programs, Finland, England, the UK, and some other programs. And, maybe after I finish talking, and you can kind of jump in and talk about, like, what you saw, because I know you had some important thoughts about that. So as I said, we're starting to get more focused and really, like, looking at the Cahoots program more deeply. Anne has already reached out to Cahoots to see whether they'd be willing to come talk to us. We wanted to do that in January, and also found out that Rochester has hired Cahoots for a one-year consultation to get them set up. It was $25,000 to get them set up. So we were thinking that it would be really good to talk to Rochester as well to find out, like, what the process was. So what we talked about, well, we have less than 2 months, and wanted to get more focused, and we're going to start drafting, like, different pieces, hopefully, like, sometime this month, different pieces of our final report, the research we've done, and then obviously the final recommendation that we want to make. We are also hoping to get back Brookline, this Center for Mental Health in Brookline, back to talk to us once we have some, once we have, like, our recommendation close to see, like, what are the things that they can partner on, and including the unhoused people. I think Raul, you had mentioned that they don't have a lot of people on the ground. They're not very strong with that. So sort of talking with them about the possible expansion of that. And so it's really like, I think we're aware that there's not a lot of time, and that we are, I believe we are getting more focused. So, and Alex, do you want to jump in on anything?
Yeah, so I heard from someone at Cahoots last night, and they are willing to talk to us. I'm trying to figure out, I think it's a complimentary initial phone call, but I'm going to check with that they're not expecting to be paid to come speak with us for an hour about their program in more depth. So we're going to set that up either before the Christmas holiday break or sometime early January. And we'll certainly let you know, Raul, when that happens, if you'd like to come. We're still looking at other crisis support programs, nationally and internationally. I did find one in Sacramento, California yesterday that is more radical than in their approach, much more overtly kind of anti-police in their approach, in terms of crisis services to people in Sacramento. And I reached out to them as well, just to get their feedback on their program and what's working. So we're trying to keep an open mind about different programs. It does seem like Cahoots at this point is a crisis program that many cities across the United States are very interested in working with. Rochester has, New York has entered into this one-year contract with them, which does cost $25,000 for the year, which we discussed briefly on the call last night, our meeting last night, and thought was something that we could consider if we ended up thinking Cahoots might be the type of program for us to develop. It didn't seem like an outrageous consultant fee for a year, so we're thinking more about that, but obviously we need to learn more, before we get to any kind of recommendation stage.
So it's interesting, Anne, about if we're gonna have them consult with us for the 1 hour session, and if
not consult with us for one session, just
I mean when
talk
we
with us.
talk to us, right? Sorry,
Yeah.
But if they say they need, like if they need that fee or something, we do still have some money, right? Like we could kind of do that. I'm not sure if the survey has used up all the money that we have,
Right.
or
No, we technically, if they tell us that, yes, we'd be happy to come talk with you for an hour, and this is what we charge, then that opens up a whole different discussion, and we'll obviously come, back here and say that, and we can decide as a task force whether that's something we want to do. I think it's going to be complementary. They're looking for consulting work, and this would be like an opening for them to come give us a 45-minute overview of their program, but we'll see. I'm going to email them back today.
And the good thing about Cahoots is it really covers all the aspects that we're wanting to look at, right? It's the unhoused people, it's the substance abuse, and it's the mental health. And so I think, which is why we're really excited about trying to, work with them and focus on that program. Anything, Alex, did you have anything to add?
I think you guys covered it really well.
Questions or thoughts for this group? I'll just note one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking, and was about the role of 911 dispatch and all of this. And so the two are interconnected, right? I mean, like, who is responding to what calls? Well, we get the calls coming into our dispatch center. And so thinking about what implications that might have there are going to be important as part of this. So So I think that's it.
Absolutely. And Cahoots does receive their calls via the 911 system. So, and that's something, we need to think more about. I mean, my concern about Cahoots is their program, their team is made up of a medical emergency person, nurse or EMT or whatever, and a mental health person, social worker type. And that obviously, they're getting lots of acclaim and it's working. I'd like to think a little bit more outside the box on that, because to me, that's still a fairly traditional kind of approach. I'd like to think more about peer support as a model for Brookline, so that it's not all people with licenses who are going out and serving the community, but maybe some other types of support as well. That's what I was interested in the Sacramento place, the community place, because they are sort of the opposite. And we don't have to go like completely down that road in terms of their radical approach, but they are like, peer support out of the system. We do not participate at all with police. So it would be interesting to hear from them too about their model and whether it's working, and as we develop our own.
All right, great. Thank you. All right. The next up, thank you so much for your work. The next up are the School Resource Officers Subcommittee.
I can start, I guess. We spent a lot of our last meeting just sort of processing Zoom bombing, how that impacted all of us, and trying to use that time to process so that we could move forward with the work, but feeling we needed time as a distinct group and subcommittee to process it as opposed to relive it. Yeah, so that took a big chunk of our time, and it was really necessary chunk of time for us as a subcommittee. There has been a little bit more of unearthing. I don't know. To the professor, I feel like I'm at the point I'm trying to figure out if I should keep researching or write the paper. Because I feel like every time I research, I uncover something that I want to go a little bit deeper in. And I know time is always an obstacle. But I think something that we kind of, at least I kind of moved to is, at least for me, it felt as if right before Thanksgiving, there was this document that was presented to us that expanded the number of school resource officers than what I was understanding there were. And so it's still a little unclear what that sort of the publishment date of that and all that transpired. Like I felt like we spent most of our time thinking there was only one school resource officer, and then we saw a document that said there were 4. And so, just sort of moving that, as well as, if that's the case, then what's the role in the middle schools, if we're calling them school resource officers? They've often been connected to health classes, which in and of itself isn't an issue, but I think sort of middle school in Brookline has a very different history. As far as I'm understanding, it started with DARE, which we know didn't work, and then it changed to AWARE, and now it's changed to something else. And it's just been very unclear who's sort of driving what. And like a lot of things in Brookline, there isn't a well-documented paper trail. So like, I can't say like this, and again, I'm speaking for myself, so others chime in. I think one thing that's become very clear to me is that, the stuff that has happened with the school resource officer in Brookline has felt very un-Brookline to me. And what I mean by that is, like, for me to get approval to teach kids a class on race, I had to go before school committee. I had to go before the superintendent. I had to file all these other things. I can't find any school committee records on the school resource officer. I can't find any select board, references on the school resource officer. I can't, Michael Downey, I think he heard me say that, like, the signature on it is from somebody from Norfolk County. Like, I haven't seen or heard of any process that went through legal counsel. And to me, that just seems really un-Brookline. Frankly, that frightens me. Like, it frightens me. I wonder, anytime we want to get a little bit of a nugget through, it has to go through like advisory board. And I don't think this did. I know for walk and talk, some of that money comes from the BHA. I'm wondering, does some of this money for school resource come from the school committee budget or the school side budget as opposed to police budget, as opposed to town budget? And none of that's really clear or easily traceable. And to me, that feels very un-Brookline. And so, yeah, I don't want to put that out there as if I'm like uncovering Watergate or something like that. I don't actually believe that. Like, I don't think there's like this insidious thing there. What I think is there's a privilege that is exposed through what happened with the school resource officer, where things can happen in Brookline that I don't think happen in any other institutions in and around. Like, again, if I wanted to just make minor change, we had to go to school committee to actually notify parents an extra time during first quarter and get approval for that, to notify like parents how their kids were doing in our classes. We had to go to school committee for that, but we didn't have to go to school committee to put a police officer in Brookline High School for the first time in 175 years. Like none of that makes sense to me. And so, yeah, I don't know. Again, I can keep digging, but I know eventually I have to write this paper.
Mm.
And so, yeah.
I've got some questions, but anyone else from the subcommittee want to say anything else?
I just wanted to lift up something that we arrived at during our discussions in as Malcolm was saying, I know I'm going to go off video just so it doesn't get glitchy. In trying to do the processing of the Zoom bombing, part of what we talked through as a group is that in some respects, it's a bit of an object lesson for us about the relationship that we want the police to have in instances where there is harm done to a portion of the community. So we talked a little bit about the degree to which is there a report that is filed about this incident. We don't want to lose sight of the fact that it happened, so that if it happens again, people treat it as if it's the first instance of it happening. And so the ability then for us to try to figure out accountability and so that it's not as if the incident never happened, but not training the resources of governance in the town on our youth. That's not what we want to have happen either. So there was an important juncture for us to try to figure out how do we want something like this to model what the combination of policing and public safety resources and citizens and residents, how do we want all of that to fit together?
Thanks for thinking about that. That's an important question. Okay. I think there's one question that Malcolm, you asked that I think we can clear up, and Mel, if you're with us, it was the budget question, and I don't know that you can have an answer right now. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But if we can track that down, the question I think Malcolm was asking is about where the school resource officers are budgeted from. Is it the police department, the school side, or some mix thereof?
Sure. I mean, many of those questions that were asked, I don't know the answer, but that and others, if you want me to research some of the background, I will. But I will certainly do the the budget question.
Yeah. All right, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry, I just muted myself. Eitan, I saw your hand up for a question or comment.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, I just want to say that this, I think like this, what Malcolm described in terms of essentially not having answers to the origin story of a lot of the policy here, it seems to me, the most maybe the most important thing we've discovered on our path here. And I just want to ask specifically, how much of this do you think like there's no answer to, like there's no one in town that knows the answer to, or that if Mel looks up, you won't find, versus like there are people in the police department or like we just haven't found the person? I mean, do you have a sense of, it seems like Malcolm, you were describing it as more like no one knows the answers to these questions, or do you feel like it's just like, it just was going to take an insane amount of work to figure out the answers?
I mean, I can speak to my process. I mean, it's been a lot of oral histories. And so that, there is no paper trail. And like with a lot of oral histories, to really like come up with a comprehensive, well thought document, that would take a lot of work. I mean, I've talked with like, former headmasters as well as, other people who are connected. There's still some emails out there that haven't been responded to. I would say everybody has been super amenable and willing to talk to me, but how to like actually put that together would be a lot of work. And even that's, it's just weird for institutions to have such a lack of a paper trail. And so as I talk to people about like sort of growing influence, particularly at the high school, because that's where, for most of this time, we perceived that was where the only school resource officer was. There's some discrepancies, not large, but some, and a lot of that's about perspective and point of view. And so, I think that's where I'm at, Eitan. Like it would be a real project to gather those histories and come up with a really comprehensive, to me, concise and decisive document. Not that I don't feel like I have good information now, but I just think it's been, it's just, again, it's very bizarre for our town to lack such a paper trail.
Chi-Chi? Chi-Chi, it's difficult to understand you right now. It's a sound issue.
Let me see if I turn off my camera. Is this better?
No, it seems to be, no, it's something else. I don't think it's a bandwidth issue. Yeah, you sound very low and distorted.
Okay, I'm switching to my laptop.
Well, now you sound louder and distorted, but we can at least hear you.
There's something going on with my sound. I thought it was just Google Meet, but apparently it's also on Zoom. So apologize for sounding distorted. So first of all, I want to thank Malcolm for all the work and research on this. I agree, it's very un-Brookline. Usually we are a process-heavy community. I think what this really shows is where power lies when something like this is able to happen without. I mean, when we had a $2,500 grant at we work with.
Chi-Chi, I'm afraid it's very difficult to understand what you're saying. It's not so bad when we can hear you speaking loudly, but when it's coming up very soft, unfortunately. Devin's mentioning to try headphones, that might do the trick.
I don't have headphones.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just disconnected my AirPods. It's something with the AirPods. So I'm just no headphones, naked ears here.
Here we go. Go for it.
So I wanted to thank Malcolm for all his research and work. You know, this certainly is disturbing. It's what I was saying is it's an indication of the fact that, you know, we have to go through a lot of process for everything else, but this is an indication of where informal power lies in this town and community. You know, there's been a lot of analysis recently because of the Trump administration about where explicit power lies in and implicit institutions and norms. And I mean, what this shows is implicit power in this town lies with the police department. I mean, you know, we were talking about last year about cutting the school budget because of deficits in the town, but you know, the idea of cutting the police budget was like radioactive. And I think it's the same phenomenon here. And part of the work of this task force will be to push back on and sort of reimagine those norms or change those implicit norms. And this sort of dovetails to the work of departmental analysis, where part of that is overlaying a level of civilian oversight and management of the police department.
Thanks, Chuchi. Other questions or comments? I think one critical piece here too is to understand a process question, and Malcolm, I think you mentioned this, the role of the school committee in all of this. I'd love, frankly, to hear from the school committee chair, Suzanne Federspiel, about this. You know, her understanding of the role of school resource officer, the desire, at least her desire as school committee chair, to be involved or not involved in this process. It seems from everything I'm hearing that the school committee has not been involved in the SRO process, whether it be selection or determining whether or not there even is an SRO. The legislation that's pending, back in the state legislature, one of the things that did not come back from the governor as a recommended change is the new legislation would eliminate the requirement for a school resource officer. Obviously, if you haven't already, I recommend the subcommittee, but the entire task force, take a look at that specific section, especially. It seems without that requirement there does come a decision as to whether or not, and I think the school committee should certainly be involved in that decision as to whether or not it makes sense to move forward as is, to make changes, to the program, whatever that is. But I'd really love for, I don't think the work of this subcommittee will be complete unless we hear from at least the chair of the school committee, if not other members as well. And certainly, I know we're hearing from the public. You might have something to say about that. The other thing I'll tag on to that is, I know there was a survey that went out through to families through, I think it was Steps to Success, the METCO program, and African American and Latino Scholars program. I think I got that right. Do we have the feedback yet from that survey?
So yeah, we haven't broken down all the feedback from that, and school's been a crazy place. I kind of pushed on some folks to make sure we have a meeting, because we need to actually hear from parents and kids beyond the survey. We have not had that or that sort of breakdown of data from that survey in the midst of a bunch of other things. But I will just say, that has not happened. But I would also say, Raul, I think I'm equally feeling the select board on this as well. I mean, if the select board are the commissioners of the police, this should be something that they have to own as well. I mean, I think, to me, we're putting all of our town's kids. I mean, Brookline is a really wealthy community where the overwhelming majority of families send their kids to the public schools. And so, it is a school issue, but to me, it's also a town issue. Like why what in the select board made them think this was okay other than following a law? And then, to me, the school committee side is similar, but like, again, what in that 175-year history made you think we needed a police officer in the building? And while, I don't want to speak for Michael, but I think he said this, and so did my ACLU connection, said, while the law doesn't require somebody to be in the building full time, certainly the spirit of the law, it makes it almost impossible to do the work expected of a school resource officer without being in the building. Like what they're asking them to do is that. And so I think, I think this is bigger than just one side, frankly.
Great. We're in from Mel on the budget question, confirming that the school resource officer program is funded fully in the police department budget. If there are any questions about the program that can be readily answered, he'd like the opportunity to do that. Great. And Malcolm, I take your point about the select board taking some ownership and involvement here too. I think that's a point well taken. Yeah. I should note also the survey that I was mentioning, I think was, and correct, maybe provide some clarity on this, Malcolm, I think was initiated through the schools, through
Brookline High School specifically.
Brookline High School specifically. Okay, so it's not a survey of this task force for folks that are
correct
watching. That's not the other survey that we did initiate.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Was there any other questions or comments here? Going to go ahead and move on. Thank you for your work on this. Let's move on to envisioning and community engagement.
Coming. I was trying to cut Burton off camera there, but then you caught me.
Give us a wave, Burton.
Thumbs up.
But I didn't hear it say.
He said, give us a wave.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Did it. Okay. Focus. All right. So obviously the walk and talk and community engagement right now is very interconnected. He's going to look like he's stealing a computer.
Sorry.
He is. Not distracting at all. So we have the flyer. I really need help getting the flyer out. We have 300 copies of it. I am very much tacking them to all the doors in BHA that I can.
Can you just a 30-second recap of the flyer, its purpose, just for folks that might be tuning in for the first time?
Yes, the flyer is what has come up as the most effective in this moment solution we have to spreading the word about who the task force is, what our goals are, who we are on the task force, and what we're addressing, trying to solicit engagement and stories and experiences, any kind of information coming from the community to be able to do this work. And rather than doing individual walk and talk flyers and school resource flyers and flyers to let everybody know who we are, it's combined into one with a list of not sample questions, but sort of like, this is the type of information we're looking for regarding walk and talk, SROs, people in crisis, police, I don't know how to word that. All of these things in one, hopefully efficient flyer to get to accomplish all that information, to get out into the world. I'm making Facebook versions and Instagram versions that can be passed around, don't have so much text on them. And there is also a website in progress, which is so slow, but when we are not paying someone to build it, that is what we have. But it's coming along. I, for a moment, thought maybe we should get a Facebook page, but I'm wondering if we had a Facebook page, and Raul, Raul called me glutton for punishment for that. Because in my mind, I was like, oh, we'll just shut off the comments. It'll just be an information page. But perhaps maybe Michael Downey can tell me that if that's possible as a town task force, can we shut off comments, or do people really get to?
And you're saying on the Facebook page?
Yeah, if we did a task force Facebook page to be able to just put the information out there quicker than the website.
And you want to edit comments or
No.
not allow, restrict comments, not allow
Yes.
comments?
Yes.
This is
And are
Devin.
you, yeah.
Oh,
Devin,
sorry,
thanks.
Michael, just because what I know from how we manage the other pages is what you can do is control for profanity, but you can't stop comments. So, I mean, this is also a discussion of, you know, if this would technically be an official town page or not. So we can revisit that offline too. But if it is going to be like an official Town of Brookline task force page, then you can't turn off the comments.
Okay. We'll come back to that because comments on a Facebook page is indeed a mess and will waste a whole lot of time. So just trying to, you know, rapid fire, get as much information out there as possible, digitally and physically on a piece of paper. Yeah, anyone who has the ability to help, tack flyers up. We made a pretty good list of, you know, locations that people need to be at in this COVID moment, to focus around like Stop and Shop and you know, CVS and places like that, and not necessarily, I mean, I know that we're, you know, things get ripped down. We're going to put these up and most of them are going to be ripped down. But yeah, anyone who has the ability to help, please do. Yeah, that's where we're at. We're just pushing to get as much word out as possible. And again, there's also contact information on there, so it's important for all of us. Hit me up outside of this moment and please help. I'll deliver you some flyers.
I think Mike was about to volunteer, so that's good. He'll hit you up separately.
I was going to volunteer somebody else. Bonnie, you were at the, you joined the advisory committee meeting last night and heard Michael Alperin.
I sure did.
And I know you don't want to formally associate the survey with the housing authority, but I'm pretty sure that he would be happy to get people to and the flyers into the facility so that we could distribute them, if that's an issue at all.
Well, yeah, but I've had those conversations and it's a little bit more complicated than that, but yes. Yeah.
So you talk to him and you could, you're set. Okay, good.
I will make sure he knows.
Yeah.
Great. Other questions or comments for the subcommittee? Eitan.
On the subcommittee, but I just had a thought. I don't know if our subcommittee or any other ones have made a purposeful effort to reach out to some of the folks who've organized the Black Lives Matter protest in the summer. I think it was maybe students, siblings that organized the one that you spoke on, Raul, at the library. And I was just thinking that one of our subcommittees, probably this one, should try to get contact information for organizers of those groups, those events, and see, A, for general feedback, and B, specifically for getting the word out on this.
That avenue has been used.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, great.
In many other contexts as well as this one before our subcommittee. But revisiting that is always a good idea.
You know, to that end, I'm really thinking forward to our I'm going to use final in like huge quotes, right? Final report, which is probably going to be, I think, the start of more work for someone, maybe some of us, likely some of us and some other folks. But before that report is submitted to the select board, we're going to need to have a public hearing as a task force. We'll present that report and we'll hear from members of the public. I think it's going to be essential that some of those folks, like the Anyaosa family that were leading some of those events, and some of the young people, Lexi Herman and others, Harriman, sorry, and others who led the Wake Up Brookline events, and other folks that were involved in really creating the space for a task force like this to exist, to hear from them about what they think about the work that we've done to date. I think that's going to be really important. So we've got some time before that happens, but just so you all know, there's process-wise, there will be a point at which we have at minimum one public hearing and presentation of the work that we've done to date, receive feedback from the community. It doesn't necessarily need to be only in that public hearing that we receive feedback. Folks can email us. I've had folks snail mail letters to me about issues. I mean, we need to provide, sufficient time for the community to respond to what we've put together, and then for us to then take into account community feedback and perhaps make some changes or additions to what we've put together, and then report to the select board, who, by the way, may ask us to make some more changes or you name it. We'll see how that goes. But in any case, I just wanted to lay some of that out, and to just note right now that it'll be important to have those folks that Bonnie and Eitan were talking about, and others present to let us know what they think about the work that we've done. Yeah.
If I could just add, I spoke to Lloyd Gelino, and he is more than willing to help us disseminate information. He has lots of different contacts through his Office of Diversity, which includes different activist groups within the town, but also things like Brookline has I'm going to screw up the name, it's a group of clergy across denominations that he reaches to, and he said he'd be more than willing to take any information and help us disseminate it through those networks. And so, I just know in the past it's pretty far reaching. It would be some duplication, but it's pretty far reaching.
Can you please give him our flyer?
Lloyd,
I'm right here. So yes, yeah. And I did talk to Malcolm, and I did agree to that. So.
Oh, there you are, Lloyd. I was like,
yes.
His voice. Spread it far and wide, please, Lloyd.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Actually, that interfaith group, that's where I first met Almas and Ron, actually. Through that group. Well, maybe not first, but that's where we really got to talking about these issues, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm emailing you right now, Lloyd.
Okay.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments here? And I just want to thank this subcommittee in particular. I know getting to this place, all the subcommittees have been doing tremendous work. And I just want to note that this in particular, this was the subcommittee that we identified very early on, whose work, I think more than any other, has implications for all of us, right? Like, we all have an interest in hearing from members of the community, but in particular, those members of the community that we don't always hear from, but who are disproportionately impacted by our current approach to public safety. And so I appreciate you all going, doing what needs to be done to make sure those voices are heard. So thank you for that. All right, and our final subcommittee update is from Departmental Analysis.
Okay, I'll start there. So here's our plan. We are, Chi-Chi is putting together a final draft, or not a final draft, an initial draft of our recommendations and findings. Our committee is reviewing that on Tuesday of next week, and then going to send it to everyone make it public, right, as a draft, or no, share it non-publicly. I don't know the rules for that.
I'll post
Sharon?
the draft on Google Docs and send the link, have the link posted.
Okay, great. So the goal is for our next week's full committee meeting, that is our last task force meeting of the year, for everyone to be able to read our findings and recommendations for this subcommittee. The other thing I'll say is, well, I don't, the survey I think is somewhat in the subcommittee, somewhat in the community engagement subcommittee, whatever it is. We continue to get responses. I know there's been some questions that folks have sent to me about folks who are wondering about methodology and representativeness and all that. And some people have contacted me over the last few days because they threw out their letter, but so I've been giving them their like their code, for their unique code, so they can take the survey. My goal on that front is after I'm done grading, which is basically the first week of January, I'm going to do an analysis and write a draft report. And so hopefully our first meeting, it's a little bit tight timeline, but hopefully our first meeting after the break, and certainly by the second one, if not the first one, I'll be able to give a presentation of findings from the survey. And we can obviously have further discussion about analysis and all that. So I think that's where we stand, but others might want to add.
Others on the subcommittee that want to weigh in or share out? It's me, Gigi, and Mike, and Eitan. Okay, I think that does capture it. So I just want to emphasize, what it was that Eitan was talking about here is, on Tuesday we will meet, and that is our meeting to finalize what we are going to present to the full task force a week from today on Friday. So between Tuesday and Friday, you all will have an opportunity to take a look at that Google Doc, and it'll be posted publicly as well. So the public will have an opportunity to take a look at that Google Doc with our essentially report and recommendations. And so please use those 3 days, sorry about that, to take a look at that, or 2.5 days, I guess, to take a look at that and think about what kind of comments or questions you have relative to that report. So Friday morning isn't the first time you're seeing it or thinking about the recommendations that are in it. So please, do that. Does that make sense?
How much of the 2-hour meeting next week are we dedicating to this? That might help us make our plans.
We've got time. I hadn't heard from any of the other subcommittees. That's what I was listening for throughout the other updates, to see if anyone else was ready to deliver more than we did a few weeks ago when we did some substantive sort of, here's where we are, any kind of report the way that departmental analysis is. So I don't know what else we need to carve out time for next week except for this. So if if there's anybody else that thinks we need more time to discuss something else, let me know. I would say, an hour discussion for this seems appropriate, with the understanding that folks are not looking at the document anyway for the first time on Friday morning. So that means that all of us have to do a little bit of work, a little homework before Friday comes. And so I think that'll keep us to an hour. If we need a little bit more time, we may be able to carve it out, but let's plan on an hour. How about that? Bonnie, I saw you unmute if you have something to add.
I don't. I was going to ask you to repeat what you just said, but I think I gathered it together. So I'm good.
So Tuesday afternoon, we have a meeting at 3 o'clock or something like that. Tuesday afternoon, at the conclusion, that's going to work through a few things that maybe we just need to settle on, certain details for X, Y, or Z. After that, you should be able to have access to the now confirmed, approved by the subcommittee report and recommendations that'll come to the task force, and that'll give you some time to take a look at it before we have a discussion. And Devin, let's make sure we put possible vote if we're at that place. We probably won't vote next Friday, but we'll put it on there just in case there's some element of it we'd like to vote and be able to move on with. All right. Any other questions or comments here? Okay. Hearing none. Well, we had policing survey update next. We heard some from Eitan. Eitan, I just want to note that another press release went out and through the email channels and the social channels from the town of Brookline, encouraging people to to complete the survey and indicated, just like Chi-Chi's really good memo had, it showed the picture of the envelope so people can look for that. Helpful to note, I appreciate Eitan, you saying that, and we've done this before, people that say, hey, you know what, I received it, I didn't even look at it, I tossed it, is there any opportunity? We've got a number of people that have done this. Is there any opportunity for me to like get access to the link that was in there? And the answer is yes. And so it takes a little work on our part, but Brian Schaffner, the principal investigator at Tufts, has been really kind to be able to look folks up, get them their link and their password, confirm first of all that they were part of the people that were sent the letter, and then to get them that link and password. And we've been able to do that for people. So if there are folks that are listening to this right now and you think that you're in that group that received the letter and just didn't, can't find it, or maybe tossed it out by mistake, and you'd like to participate in that survey, why don't you just please send me a note. It's rfernandez@brooklinema.gov. And I'll make sure that we get you that link and your own unique password to be able to fill that out. I'll say if you did not get a letter, only people that received the letter were invited to participate in the survey. We don't have the ability to create a link just for you if there wasn't one already created. We don't have the ability to add people to the 25,000 respondent, folks that letters were sent out to. We don't have the ability to do that. So if you weren't part of that initial group that was sent a piece of mail, then we don't have the ability to add you at this point. With that said, we are very interested to hear what you have to say. And I think you've heard us lay out certain periods, including that public hearing that we're going to have. And there are other ways to just email us. We've got a website that's starting up. You might see some flyers around town asking you to email or even call us. And there's a number on there as well. So there are ways to reach us. And certainly you can email me directly if you'd like to share feedback just with me, or let me know if you'd like for me to share that with the entire task force. Happy to do that too. Okay. What else are we missing here? Anything?
Devin asked when to stop publicizing the survey. I would say Christmas, basically. We already got them. I think we're something at like close to 1,100 responses at this point. I don't have update as of today, but we're around 1,100. From now on, it's really going to be a trickle. So we have the bulk of the ones we're going to get probably, but especially since there's still publicity and still outreach, we should definitely keep it open. I would say till Christmas, and then we can shut down the publicity or so.
And for those who weren't watching last week, Eitan let us know that in the new year is when we're going to actually be. You'll have some time to pull together and present the data from the survey. Great. Any other questions or comments, Bonnie?
I have a question. So when we say that this survey is anonymous, how is it disconnected from, because I've had people ask, like, if we can give them a link that is connected to their name, or not a link, but a password that's connected to their name, how is the survey results?
Yeah, good question. Right. We needed to be able to randomize who's going to get the survey, right? So we needed to give people a unique identifier to who they were. What's going to happen is when it's time to do the analysis, I'm going to ask Professor Schaffner to send me a data file, and that data file is going to have no identifying information. It's going to have only the information that people self-report, which is anonymous. And that's a file that we will be able to make public because it will be fully anonymized. The one exception to this is that there are a number of open response type questions where people can share personal stories or anecdotes. And we'll have to, this is always the case with this kind of survey, sometimes people do reveal personal information in that. And so we will have to decide based on what type of stuff is in there, whether we should redact all of those kinds of responses, whether we should do it on a case-by-case basis. We didn't make a decision about that, and I don't know what the like how that rubs up against whatever the open whatever laws, but yeah, that all the data that I will ever see and that this committee will ever see will be completely detached from the voter registration database, the census database that was used to make the contact.
Thank you.
Good question. That's a helpful answer. Thank you. Okay. There's nothing else here. I want to move on to our new business I mentioned, and if we can promote Transportation Administrator Todd Corain, great. Here he comes. Thank you, Devin. And last week we had Todd with us just to sort of jump in and provide a little bit of context around our conversation around what we've been calling sort of the denominator, right? The thinking about with respect to traffic stops and race in particular, thinking about what is the proportional representation of folks from various communities of color and white people that are passing through Brookline. We learned a week or so ago that 84% of stops in Brookline are actually of non-Brookline residents. And if I have that number right, I think I do. And so, it's really important to understand who is passing through Brookline and to better understand whether or not we in fact do stop motorists of color at disproportionate rates. We certainly have seen data that indicates when we do stop motorists, all motorists, particularly for speeding, which is one of the highest sort of offenses, one of the number one reasons why we stop people in Brookline, that we do disproportionately ticket motorists of color compared to white motorists. And so we've seen that clearly in the data. But the question is first today really about stops. And so Transportation Administrator Corain provided for us and is in our packet a map that maybe Todd, you can walk us through and just share any more information that you have about what it looks like for folks sort of commuting through Brookline or passing through Brookline, or maybe stopping in Brookline to shop or visit a doctor for various reasons. So Todd, take it away.
Thank you. Do I have the ability to share my screen?
You will in one moment.
Right, thank you.
All set.
Yeah, great, thanks. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so what I tried to do, in speaking with you last week, was to try to look at essentially where's the traffic coming through. So we know that Brookline has a large generation of cut-through traffic. Given our proximity to Boston, Cambridge, and we do not have large destinations in Brookline, large job centers, et cetera, that would warrant the amount of vehicles coming into town that do. So we know that they're basically traveling through Brookline. And what I tried to do to try to give you, the task force, some idea of where the communities where the traffic's coming from as it travels into Brookline and eventually out of Brookline, so that you can try to factor in what that denominator would be with respect to since we are bordered on Boston on three sides, it might I think some would probably argue that we should look at Boston's sort of racial and ethnic mix for that denominator. But when we look at where the traffic's coming through or coming from, that might not be sort of the good choice, and I leave that decision to the task force. So what I did was I looked at the major entryways, so the gateways into Brookline, and we all know that we all have and commuters all have their favorite cut through routes, side streets, those types of things, but we still have the vast majority of traffic enter the town at these gateway points. So, here's a map of Brookline, and I looked at updated traffic count data that we have from private projects or our own counts, either that have been submitted to us or to the city of Boston through their planning agency or the city of Newton through their planning agency to get the most updated numbers we have for these entry points. And so, right here, the two yellow ones, the top one is actually Harvard Street. The next one is Washington Street. We know that, regionally, the traffic that enters from these areas are from the Allston-Brighton neighborhood, but also are from suburbs to the northwest, Watertown, and sort of that direction from there. And what I did was I totaled up all of the AM peak and the PM peak and then gave the percentage. So we know on the average morning, in the morning, 411 vehicles during that peak hour enter Brookline from this location. And that's roughly 7% of the AM traffic that's coming in. During the PM, we know 503 vehicles are entering in this area, and that's roughly 8%. And I did this for each location. So the next yellow one's Washington Street. Again, it's 6% and 7% of the respective traffic that's entering Brookline during either the AM or peak period. And combined, coming from that sort of Allston, Brighton, Watertown, and parts of the Northwest, 13% of the traffic in the morning entering Brookline, and then 15% of the traffic in the morning, in the evening is entering there. For the next ones, I'm going to actually zoom so we can kind of, there we go. Are the green, and I meant to actually, I sent you an earlier version. I have another version where I actually break out the two separate green ones. These sort of top two green along the left side of what I'm looking at anyways, are, the main entry points for traffic coming from the western suburbs. And we know that it comes from as local as Newton and as far away from where I live and beyond, which is, Auburn, Mass, out by Worcester County. So these are the sort of main entry points for the western suburbs, which certainly have a less diverse racial mix as compared to Brookline or even or the city of Boston. And this is actually the largest percentage area of people coming through. So the top one is actually Beacon Street as it heads into Brookline at the Boston border in Cleveland Circle. So 15% of the morning traffic comes from this location here. 972 vehicles enter Brookline during the peak hour in the morning. During the evening, 789 or 12% of evening traffic entering Brookline enters from this point. And the largest percentage point wise of all the individual gateways is the next one, which is Boylston Street, Route 9, which makes sense. It's a 4-lane highway under Mass DOT jurisdiction that stretches all the way out to the western part of the state. Here in the morning, we have 1,351 vehicles enter, or 20% of that total vehicles in the morning entering. And then the PM, 1,420, 21% of all vehicles entering in the evening enter Brookline from this location. In total, those sort of western suburbs are 35% of vehicles entering in the morning and 33% entering in the evening. And the next two green ones, I actually, I can send you an updated one. I actually broke this out because they are different than the other two green. In my later version, they actually were a different color. These points are along our border with the city of Boston, West Roxbury border. And they are, the first one is LaGrange Street, and the second one is Independence Drive. And we know, based on who's coming in here, certainly people from West Roxbury, Hyde Park, within the city of Boston, but also all of the suburbs that stretch down to the southeast, southwest, including Dedham, Norwood, Walpole, etc. This is that, this is the commute that they are coming, the entryway they're coming into if they're trying to reach Boston or Cambridge on the other side of us. And, in the morning, the first one, which is LaGrange Street, in the morning, there's 598 vehicles, or 9% of morning traffic enters at this location. In the evening, 412 vehicles, or 6% of PM traffic enters in this area. And then the next one is Independence Drive. Again, it's the same, sort of makeup of traffic, regional traffic, with respect to certainly residents from West Roxbury and Hyde Park, but also Dedham and down. And there, it's, in the morning, the 792 vehicles entering at this one location. That's 12% of all vehicles. In the PM, it's 366, or 5%. And these two combined represent 21% in the morning and then 11% in the evening. So this is sort of the second largest area of entry points, are the West Roxbury, Hyde Park, and then southwest suburbs. And then coming back up, we have in the blue here is Washington Street. Many of you might think of it as Boylston Street, but it's Washington Street right at the border where South Huntington would come in from Boston. So this is sort of the Gateway East that's currently under construction. And these are all pre-COVID numbers. I did not look at any traffic counts that were done during COVID, because obviously they'd be skewed way down. In the morning, there's 819 vehicles enter in this location, or 12%. And in the PM, it's 950 vehicles enter, and it's 14%. And this is the one area where the vast majority of traffic entering would probably most likely be Boston residents. This borders Mission Hill and other communities, and this is the sort of travel pattern if you're coming from Boston or through Boston into Brookline. So this is the one area where I think you could probably make a very strong argument that this would be, most likely to resemble Boston's population. The other two red ones are what I call the Longwood medical area. So the vast majority of traffic coming in from these two areas are related to specifically the Longwood medical area, or Masco, and their academic institutions, et cetera. And I've called them out separately. There certainly is probably some population-wise that come in from the Fenway area of Boston, but this is largely, we know for a fact, this is largely Masco-driven traffic that is entering either Brookline Avenue at the border here, which is the lower one, and the top one is Longwood Avenue. For Brookline Avenue in the morning, the 662 vehicles, or 10% of the traffic coming in Brookline in the morning, enters from this location. In the evening, it's 1,116. That's 17%, as sort of those people are making their commutes out of that area back home to wherever they're going. And the same for the Longwood Avenue. The AM is 604, 9%. PM is 700, or 10%. There are two gateways that we did not have good counts for, and that is Beacon Street heading westbound at the border, as well as traffic coming over from Cambridge and the suburbs to the north of us, or via the VU Bridge, which generally enters via Essex Street and weaves its way through the Cottage Farm neighborhood. We did not have any updated or good data there. So you really, this is, the goal here was just to give you, some idea of where the traffic was coming from during the peak periods, so that as you look to, try to, zero in on where that denominator is, that to give you some, basis to say, okay, well, we should probably be looking towards, the makeup of, and factoring in the makeup of communities to the west, north, or south of us, because we know that regionally Brookline is a large cut through traffic wise, and that's really where the vast majority of traffic is coming from. It's not coming from the city of Boston as it travels through Brookline.
Thank you, Todd. I'm going to open it up to questions from or comments from the task force on this. Mike? Oh, and I'm sorry, somebody has their hand raised too. Oh, that was Mike, great.
Mike, go ahead. First of all, I'm former chair of the transportation board, so this is data that I'm sort of, oh yeah, I understand this stuff because we used to wallow in it. 56% of the traffic that's coming through, 56% of the denominator is from predominantly western, southern suburbs that are predominantly white. And so if you're looking at the racial mix of traffic coming in versus the racial mix of stops, you have to recognize that more than half of the traffic coming in is from an area where there are not, where the population is not diverse at all. It's really only that one Huntington Avenue entry point where there's a substantial flow from an area where there's you would expect a diverse demographic coming in. And that's a really striking, that 56% number, that plus the 13% that come in from Austin, Brighton, that's a very big piece of the total, which suggests that if we're stopping up predominantly people of color, that there's something worth looking at here, to be sure.
Thanks, Mike. Other questions or comments? Todd, just, thank you for this presentation. I'm trying to see if we can put a fine point on it that'll help us move forward in our work here. As a whole, when we look at the traffic cutting through Brookline, are we, if we're able to say, or would you reckon that the traffic is more? It seems clear that it's less diverse than if we just looked at the Boston representation. I mean, that's painfully clear. Would you say it's more or less diverse than Brookline itself?
You'll have to forgive me. I am not the best source of the diverse makeup of Brookline when it comes to the population. I do believe that when you look at the western suburbs, and they are far less diverse than Brookline, and Brookline kind of lies in the middle, when it comes to the city of Boston versus these suburbs. So it might be that if you can narrow it down to that sort of granular level of looking at each community and where the traffic comes from, it might be that you come back to what the diversity of Brookline is somewhere in the middle. When you consider that a certain percentage of traffic is coming in from Boston, that is, far more diverse than Brookline. And of course there is, Brookline traffic. And then when you factor in the western suburbs, which is, far less diverse than Brookline, especially the further you go out. So I think that is certainly not appropriate to use Boston as that denominator. It is probably somewhere in the middle between Brookline and those western suburbs.
Thanks, Doug. Anyone else on this?
Yeah, I wanted to point out that in terms of even using Boston, you wouldn't use the entire city of Boston as your denominator. You would use, some of the neighborhoods that Todd mentioned, for example. Alston is 6% Black. It's not nowhere near the percentages of overall of the city of Boston. Longwood is the Longwood area in Boston is 6%. West Roxbury is 10%. So, a lot of the folks who are Black and brown in Boston are in Dorchester, Mattapan, which, it'd be hard to say how many of them go through Boston versus an adjoining neighborhood like Alston, Brighton, where we know there's a lot of folks coming in. And I don't know if Todd could say anything about that. Like, even the Huntington Avenue, that's Mission Hill, so that's 16% Black, but would we be expecting folks from Dorchester or Mattapan to be coming through?
Yeah, I mean, certainly those, if they have employment centers that are sort of all on the Allston Brighton side or traveling to BU, we do know there's a fair number that will cut through Brookline. Boston Police, Boston Fire cut through Brookline to get from, to get to access, Allston Brighton area from Mission Hill. You'll see them on Washington Street entering in that way. So I think you will see some of those community, those locations coming through Brookline. But I think you're right that, you wouldn't look at the entire makeup of Boston. You wouldn't look at East Boston, Charlestown. You would really want to focus on Allston, Brighton, West Roxbury, Hyde Park to the south. And then, sort of that Mission Hill and JP is also another big factor, obviously.
And thank you for putting together this data. It's very interesting.
And I mean, if you really want to dive into it, you would actually look at car ownership in those communities, because these are specifically cars. We're not looking at buses. We're not counting the 40 people on a bus. We're just counting that as one vehicle. So you might even want to look at, if you're going to try to factor in just those communities, you might want to look at car ownership as well.
Good point. Thank you.
Anne.
Hi. So just as a resident of Mattapan, I do drive into Brookline pre-COVID anyways. What I will say is one of the things that is a challenge as Todd talks about this is the access to public transportation to get to Brookline. So for example, if there are folks working in Brookline, it would take me 2.5 hours to get to Town Hall from my house, which is 5 miles away. I could walk it faster. But you're not going to see me on the Arbor Way or the Jamaica Way walking. But, some of that, choice of vehicle, it does tie into that. And I do see folks sort of when I go at a regular time, do see the same set of folks sort of in cars, sort of following the same cut through path, around the pond and through that way. So, it is a hard denominator to get a handle on. But I did want to bring up that point where, you have red line access and buses sort of in parts of Dorchester and really no train access into Brookline from Dorchester, Mattapan, wherever people might work in Brookline. So just wanted to bring that up.
Thanks, Anne. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, tell me if others think differently here. From what we've heard over these last few weeks, and this will be something that I know we're talking about recommendations around traffic enforcement in the Departmental Analysis group that will be back here next week, providing some recommendations. One of the things that seems clear to me, at least, and tell me if you think differently about this, is that based on the data that we see in the annual police reports and the traffic patterns that we now better understand in terms of folks coming through Brookline, which account for 84% of stops, I believe it is, in Brookline, that motorists of color are in fact disproportionately stopped by police in Brookline, and that we've also seen from the data that when stopped in Brookline, are more likely to receive a ticket than they are to receive a warning as well. Does anybody have any doubts about that?
Well, I think, bro, I don't have any doubts about that, but I think, I've heard a lot of official town folks, whether they are Brookline police or in another capacity, uphold that survey for a long time and talk about the value of it. And I've always pushed back on it. And, I don't know what evidence to actually bring to say that what for me is the obvious conclusion. Like, I don't know what else, to bring it up. I just don't at this point anymore. Yeah. And so I'm in full agreement with you, and I'm in full agreement with what you're saying. I think I need us to be ready. Like that same old survey is going to come back and say no, and it's really like a difference of 0.1%. That's the number I always hear, and so I think yeah, hopefully Todd's information helps put us over the top. I don't know, frankly.
I guess I'm a town official, and I can see that it's so clear. This is
Well, I mean,
so clear that, as Raul says, and the data is so clear. You've got basically 70% of the traffic coming into town is coming in from largely white communities, and if you had 70% of the stops being made being whites, then you would say, oh well, things are in balance. They're not in balance.
Well, I was just saying, I've never heard that from you, but
yeah.
I've sat on all kinds of diversity and all kinds of other things where that comes out, and it comes out all the time. It's gonna point to that survey, and again, I know you see it clearly, Michael. I do. I know you do, but
yeah.
I think I'm just saying this as a task force. We need to be ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is because I've been in many meetings where people say, well, you see those numbers, and the reason for those numbers is that is because of the city of Boston, right? We've heard a lot about city of Boston, city of Boston, city of Boston. That's why we're so close to the city of Boston. So that's why you see that it looks like we stop Black motorists at such a high rate is because of the city of Boston, and we just see something. I think it's. This provides us and this should end up in our report and in our conversation with the select board and in other bodies to say everything we know, the evidence that we see points to a very different conclusion. And that we need to change the conventional wisdom around this, because if we don't understand, if we don't agree that there is a problem, then we don't even stand a chance of fixing the problem if we can't even agree that there is one. And if the conventional wisdom is, or it certainly has been, that there isn't a problem, that you're just looking at the numbers wrong, that's why you see that, and in fact, what I'm seeing indicates that it might be even more of a problem than some of us believed it to be in the first place, because of the traffic cutting through Brookline, which is significantly more white than Brookline is, frankly, and that's something that I think this body and hopefully the select board, when we have that conversation as a group, can sort of, I don't know, certify the results. We talk a lot about that in these elections, but really say look, we this data is irrefutable, and we have to change the conventional wisdom around our understanding of what we see in our annual police reports around stops based on race. Not to mention the fact that this task force look beyond what is traditionally reported in the annual police report into after our officers are fully aware of the race, or at least their understanding of the race of the motorists, and the disparities between ticketing and warnings as well. I mean, anyway, you all know this. I think I'm just sort of summing it up, but Chi-Chi, please.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification? And I feel really silly for this. Malcolm, what is the survey you're referring to that's been sort of used as gospel?
So I can't remember the name of it. I mean, Chief O'Leary has referenced it. It's the one where they had people who were at different points within Brookline, looking in cars and noting race.
Is this the Northeastern one, maybe?
I couldn't say that for sure.
Oh, okay.
And I know Ryan asked in the Q&A. I just can't remember the name of it. But I mean, I don't want to drop all kinds of names, but I mean, I can think of 5 high-ranking people between BPD as well as town stuff who have almost always pointed to that and said that's evidence that there isn't really a strong disparity. And again, yeah. Again, I wish I could recall the name off the top of my head. But.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this? Todd, anything else to add, clarify based on our conversation?
No, I mean, if there's any other data points you want me to look at traffic wise, let me know if there's specific streets that you want to look at. I can try to zero in on specific streets, if, you know, sort of more in the interior Brookline, and see what we have available. That's fine. Just let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. We are in the unusual position of being early on our agenda. And so if anyone has anything else for new business, now would be the time to do that. And then I just want to talk about our next meeting and steps. Anything for new business?
I have a question. Have there been any more movement on the state's police reform stuff?
Yes. So I at the top of the meeting, I mentioned I'll briefly mention again.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. Some folks joined us after I said that too, so it's helpful for those who are attending or maybe watching later. The legislation moved to the governor's desk. He declined to either sign or veto the legislation and pushed it back to the legislature, asking for some changes. The key changes essentially were not to take police training out of the hands of his office of executive office of public safety. And the proposal from the legislature was to put that put oversight of police training in the hands of this new post committee, Police Officer Standards and Training Committee. And the majority, I think 6 of 9 members of that committee are non-police officers or civilians. And he thought that was inappropriate and that police should be responsible for training police, and that he wanted that back under his office. And then the other key thing he said he wouldn't move on was around facial recognition technology or face surveillance, which in this legislation would be banned. And I mentioned notably, Brookline has already banned face surveillance technology because of reliable concerns around racial and gender disparities in the use of face recognition technology. And the options now, the legislature could say, nope, this is our bill, sign it, don't sign it. This is our bill, or they could try to make some changes to the bill. This process also opens up the opportunity for amendments to be made by members of the legislature, which, could be a good thing, but also could be harmful too. So it's unclear. And then finally, the legislature will push something back to the governor. He can decide to sign it, he can veto it, or he can allow it to become law without signing it, without putting his name to it. And that's my understanding of the options that will be available to him next. That's where we are. He did mention that he had no issues with any of the accountability pieces with respect to qualified immunity or any of the other pieces. He was willing to accept the makeup of the post committee, even though he thought there should be more police representation on there, but he wasn't going to push on or fight on those. Okay. Anything else? Ann?
I'd like to just ask Chief O'Leary, because it came up last night in the advisory committee meeting with Mike Alperin, and is getting some renewed attention in social media. The BHA is paying the BPD, according to Alperin, $15,000 a year for the walk and talk program. And can you remind us of why that's happening and what that $15,000 a year is being used for?
The $15,000 is being paid by the BHA. I mentioned that earlier meetings,
right,
that it was from them. It's been since the beginning. Initially, it was used to offset police overtime, and it went to the police overtime account. In more recent years, it has been used to do community events. We don't have a budget that is specifically for community events, and we've used the walk and talk to do a lot of things with the young people in town and also with some of the residents. And I would say the vast majority of that $15,000 is used for those reasons.
Thank you.
Mel.
Yes, I was in attendance last evening as well. That was something I learned about last evening. I have been engaged the new director, Michael Alpern, and kind of looking at all the various arrangements between the town and the BHA, financial and budgetary arrangements. And so definitely we'll take a look at that one.
Thank you. Good. Okay, so our next meeting and our final meeting of the calendar year 2020 is going to be next Friday, December 18th. And at that meeting, we will hear about the report and recommendations from the Departmental Analysis Subcommittee. And we will have opportunities for other subcommittee updates as well, to the extent that you have more to update us on next week from this week. And if there's anything else folks would like added to that agenda, please write Devin and myself, and we'll see what kind of time we can carve out on the agenda next week for those items. But please do let us know if there's something out of the usual subcommittee updates that you'd like to add to that agenda. After next week's meeting, we will return, I believe on Friday, January 8th. One of the things I wanted to get a sense from the committee is the morning of that Friday morning in January, that is also the Supreme Judicial Court, the SJC in Massachusetts, is going to be hearing the arguments on the Gerald Alston case. I know that is a case that that many on this task force, including town staff, of course, have been following for a very long time. These will be the arguments where that the SJC will have before deciding and hopefully finally deciding on that case. If folks are willing to move this meeting with the notice that you have right now to Thursday, January 8th or January 7th, I think it is, instead of Friday, January 9th, so that those, by the way, at present moment, those arguments are going to be accessible remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which provides wide access for people not to have to go to the courthouse like I have for other cases, but to actually just be able to watch. That could change. It could end up being at this point, I doubt it will. I don't think the numbers, the COVID numbers are going to change substantially between now and then that would allow for an in-person gathering for the public. But that's something that folks will be able to watch online. And so that's why I'm suggesting it. And so is there any objection here, schedule or otherwise, to having our task force meeting on that Thursday instead of Friday? Okay.
So that would be the 7th.
Yeah. Can somebody you confirm that, Alex?
Yeah, I'm looking. It's the Friday the 8th, Thursday the 7th.
Thursday, January 7th. Thank you. Okay. Hearing no objections, we'll do that.
Raul, sorry, would it be the same time on Thursday?
It would, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's what I needed clarification. That's fine.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it would be 8 to 10 a.m. on Thursday, January 7th.
I may have to leave at 9:30, but otherwise I'm fine.
Okay. All right, we'll do that. And then I'll be sure to make sure that we share with you the information about the SJC. And it's not called a hearing, it's called something. Alex, help us out. What's it called? Or one of our lawyers. Chi-Chi. What was that?
Oral argument.
Yeah, oral arguments.
Thank you. Thank you, Chi-Chi. Yeah, thank you, Alex. The oral argument so that anyone that's interested can follow along. Great. Eitan, you good?
Yeah, I'll just have to let you know earlier in that week whether I can present on the survey that meeting or the one after.
Yes, please let us know, and understanding that it takes time to analyze the data and have it prepared to present to us. So that'll be okay. Okay, great. With that said, we will end early at 9:46. As I tell our students, don't expect it to happen all the time. We'll always end early, but we are today. I want to thank you all for your work on this. And I'll keep thanking you every chance I get, because I know that this is a lot that you're doing for us as a community, and that it matters to you. Thank you to all of our task force members and staff for your work on this. And I will see you next Friday, bright and early. Let me know if you need anything in between, okay? Take care. See you, everybody.